When the colonies were founded, they weren't empty. There were families here, royal families, black, wealthy, landowning, and many of them bore the name Washington. They weren't African slaves, they were American Moors. From the Carolinas to Virginia to Georgia, they held titles, land grants, and tribal sovereignty. This is the buried story of the Washington Moors, erased from the textbooks but not from the land. Before and during the colonial period, numerous black tribes, dynasties, and Moorish families, including those carrying the name Washington, ruled territories across the American South. These groups were labeled freedmen, mulatto, or indentured servants to mask their tribal and royal heritage. The so-called black people of the colonies were not Africans. They were indigenous American Moors with land, law, and legacy. Multiple black families in Virginia, Georgia, and South Carolina carried the name Washington before and during the time of George Washington. Census records from the 1700s show lists of free persons of color named Washington, Jefferson, and Adams, not slaves but landholders. Dr. Paul Heineg's research on free black families confirms over 100 Washington families were listed as landowning native tribespeople. These were not colonial names. These were pre-existing dynasties. The Moorish tribes of the American South included the Yamasee, Washita, Gwale, Catawba, and Black Cherokee. Moor was often used interchangeably with Black Indian or Free Negro in early American court documents. British reports show officials warned the Crown about the Moors of Carolina organizing resistance before the Revolutionary War. Moorish identity in America was indigenous, not imported. Many black and colored families in the Carolinas held colonial land patents passed down through tribal treaties and Spanish land grants. 1740s South Carolina land records list the Washington family as legal grantees under British Crown law. Before the 1830 Indian Removal Acts, many of these Moors had sovereign status as tribal members. These people were legally recognized until it became inconvenient. From the 1830s to 1900s, the U.S. Census reclassified Aboriginals as Negro, mulatto, or colored to erase tribal status. Freedmen Bureau records hid tribal identity of black families by lumping them into categories of freed slaves, even those never enslaved. The indigenous black elite became legally invisible. Erasure was done on paper first, then in public memory. The Moorish Science Temple of America, founded in 1913, preserved identity under threat of extinction. Oral histories speak of Washington Moors forming spiritual lodges under sun, moon, and star symbols before U.S. formation. Crescent, star, and the number 7 appear in early tribal iconography across Georgia and Alabama. The spiritual order of the Moors never died. It went underground. Early colonial families intermarried with powerful Moorish tribes to gain land rights and peace. Washingtons and Custuses intermarried with free people of color and native bloodlines. Later generations erased non-white ancestry from official genealogies. The Moors were foundational, not marginal, but don't get so caught up with these Eurocentric names and terms. The word Moor was not our word, it was theirs. Moor comes from the Latin Moris, used by the Romans to describe dark-skinned people from Mauritania. Later, the Spanish and Portuguese used Moro to label all non-Christian, dark-skinned, or Muslim people, regardless of origin. By the time of the English colonists, Moor became a general term for any swarthy, copper-colored, or melanated person who wasn't white, including Aboriginal Americans. It was not a name of honor. It was a racialized term imposed by outsiders, just like Negro, colored, or Indian. Our ancestors didn't call themselves Moors. Original people of the Americas had tribal names like Shi, Washita, Yamasee, Taino, Chata, Choctaw, Aniunwia, Cherokee, Olmec, Itza, Muur, or Muurs. These names reflected cosmic, geographic, or spiritual identity, not color-based labels. Moor is what the colonizers called us, not what we called ourselves. Writers like Shakespeare used Moor interchangeably with blackamoor, devil, and savage. In European literature and military dispatches, Moor often meant enemy, heathen, or uncivilized, dark-skinned person. In the 1800s and early 1900s, groups like the Moorish Science Temple of America tried to reclaim the word as a tool of legal empowerment, using it in courts and identification papers to fight Jim Crow laws. But that was a survival strategy, not an origin truth. Reclaiming Moor was a political move, but our true names go much deeper and much further back. They called them free Negroes, mulattoes, servants. But they were none of that. They were indigenous Americans with royal blood. They held the land before the colonies, before the corporations, before the deception. The Washington Moors are not a footnote. They are the foundation.